Bang ding ding, trademark. He come out 6'7" tall. Bang ding ding, one is star. Bang dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding. It is a perfect day.
Woke up to the sound of the garbage truck again. Upstairs neighbor's toilet's leaking on my head. Cars broke down, I missed the bus, there runs a 10. I had a feeling this was a day to stay in bed. I finally left my pad right on the jumbo's cloud roof. A police officer pulled out his gun and said, I said, sir, you got the wrong guy. I guess it's just the perfect day. It's just the perfect day. Na, 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 na,
Hey there, and thanks for joining us on another exciting episode of Eggs. Today's special guest is Dan Mangena. Dan is a best-selling author, entrepreneur, philanthropist, and public speaker. After a late diagnosis of Asperger's and what can only be described as a life-changing trauma at just 20 years old, Daniel began a path that went from misery to celebration. Through his struggles, he's developed a path to lasting purpose, and it's become his mission to share it with the world. By way of his world-class coaching methodology, his books, podcasts, events, and retreats, Daniel has helped individuals the world over live an abundant, joyful, purpose-driven life. Here to discuss finding purpose in business and in life, intention setting, developing an attitude of gratitude, and so much more, please join us in welcoming to the show, Daniel Mangena. How are you, Dan?
Hey, how you doing?
Doing very well. Thanks for making time for us. We're pleased to have you here.
No, excited to be a part of it. A funny thing was, I actually realized a little time after we set this up, a friend of mine actually tried to hook us up like 2 years ago, and something just didn't connect.
Huh. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that too, because when we did get this booking, maybe there was one a couple of years ago or something, but when we got this booking, something about the way it came through, it had your name maybe in the subject bar or something. And I remember thinking, God, who is this guy? Like, I feel like we knew him. And so it was kind of interesting because I was trying to place the name but I couldn't find anything like in our email history or something. Yeah. I was going back and looking and I couldn't find anything. So I was like, okay, I guess it's just up here. I don't know. But we did change email addresses somewhere along the way. Like, so if you connected maybe a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, we were using a different email. And so maybe I'm not nuts. Like maybe I need to go back and look nuts. At that old email.
I don't think we actually spoke. It was like, we said, oh yeah, let's definitely get something on the cards. And then it just didn't happen or something like that. I don't remember exactly how it went down. But
absolutely. Well, anyway, we are pleased to have you here today and looking forward to this conversation. So maybe to kick it off, let's talk a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and what you do.
Okay. Well, I'm not Australian. Just want to make that clarification because the accents sometimes get mixed up. I'm actually from East London in the UK, but I live in Cabo, Mexico now. That was that's
got to be horrible. I mean,
life's pretty rough.
It's pretty rough. It's like low 70s now. Winter's like.
I was going to say that you're a little overdressed for the beach there, but
yeah, beach time probably tomorrow. Tomorrow weekend actually got quite a week. But yeah, I moved to Mexico coming up on 3 years ago. Cabo about 2.5 years ago. Came down here for 3 days. 3 days turned to 10. Then I moved into a hotel and kind of just decided this is where I live now. And I love the freedom that I have to be able to do that. But as you mentioned, alluded to in the introduction, it did come at a cost. And part and parcel of what I do now is allowing that trailblazing that I've done to support people for whom the way that I look at creating reality is aligned with the same way that maybe some of the pain that I have had may have been skipped by me looking at some of the lessons of those who went before me.
Sure. Well, and I think there's something really to that idea of, proper mindset, right? I mean, everybody has their challenges. Some are worse than others, of course. Mm-hmm. And, but I think we have the ability to sink or swim when we're faced with that kind of adversity. And so I think it's really interesting to pick the minds of the people who chose the higher path, because there are so many people who don't. And I think it's really valuable to do that. Do you mind digging in a little bit? One of the things we like to talk about a little bit is sort of what got you here. So do you mind talking a little bit about sort of that, or, those early days, or sort of a younger version of you and how we got into this position?
Sure. Well, I was actually a bit of an arsehole up until about the age of 24 years old. Not a deliberate butthole, but it's just what happened. And I'm actually grateful. Like, the experiences that actually formed what I like to call this movie and the trilogy of Dan really are informed by losing everything so messily and disastrously at the age of 24. I'd actually made and lost 2 multi-million-pound fortunes by the age of 24 years old.
Wow.
And when I looked at the aftermath of the second loss, I was like, have I been deluded? I really was just like, what have I done? Like, mum would have had me just finish my degree, marry that girl from church, maybe be a deacon or an elder, kind of parallel away with
Sounds
that.
like our parents had similar tracks for us.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I'd initially said, I'm going to go and get a job in the city of London, maybe be an investment banker and blah, blah, blah. And that's what that's going to be. And then I actually had got into quite a prestigious university called Oxford University. I got into Keble College, Oxford, to study politics, philosophy and economics. Then there was like this whole thing in the UK that we found out a year later called the grade scandal. And I actually lost my place. So I ended up at a university I didn't want to go to. I spent like 2 weeks like arguing with my parents, AKA they were talking. I was really silent while they were talking and telling me what was going to happen. Because I was like, no, I really want to give this another try. I don't want to go to another university anyway. As happens with African parents, I ended up going to university anyway. And I really hated it. I didn't go to lectures. I just about did my homework. And during that time, I doubled down on what I'd started the process of studying about all this manifestation stuff, mindset, positive thinking, visualization. I said, you know what, screw this. I'm going to prove everybody wrong. I'm going to go off and do it, off the beaten track. And it worked for a little bit until it stopped bloody working. and here I am looking at it, it's like, I really messed up here. And my disillusion was to the level that I was like, I don't think I've got anything left in the tank. The first time I lost everything, I was still young, I was only 20 years old. So I was like, it's cool. I've lost everything, but I can do it again. And I built up it took me about a year and a half, I think, the second time, built up a little pot. I was like, yeah, cool, we're going to do it. And then it got stolen the second time. And I was like, oh my goodness, like everything's gone again. I've just made such a mess. And I really thought the only thing that I could do was just to kind of bow out and just to leave the movie. And the only reason why I didn't commit suicide was I didn't want to fail at something else. I was literally like, okay, I looked at my options.
You were afraid you wouldn't get through with it?
Yeah, I was scared that it wasn't going to work. I was going to say literally what it was. The only thing that stopped me committing suicide was the fear of being another failure. It wasn't emotional. I was very clear. It's like, okay, well, we tried this life thing. It just doesn't work. And I'm kind of just a bit more of a burden than anything else. So let's look at my options. And I'd been with an ex-girlfriend of mine. One of her friends had tried to commit suicide, and we'd all gone to the hospital the next day, and we're all sitting around the bed because her stomach got pumped. And oh, how sorry for her. And I was like, I didn't want that, because then I was just thinking everyone's going to look how pathetic. He lost everything, tried this, failed that as well. He's just a bit of a bum. So I had that. And then, I've seen people with cut marks on their wrist, and I'm like, I don't want that to go wrong.
I had a schoolmate try to swallow a gun, and he blew out half the side of his face and lived through it. And so now the rest of his life, he's walking around with that. And I don't even know what to say about that. It's just one of those, yeah.
So you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. I was just like, do you know what I need to do? I need to work out what's gone wrong with my manifesting so I can successfully commit suicide. And that's what I went. I went on a journey to perfect manifestation so that I could commit suicide. And that's how I got here today, basically.
So it's just,
that's how you end up in Playa del Carmen. That's the move, I guess.
That's it.
So was that kind of like what triggered the suicidal thoughts for you? Was that when you found out and went down this depression road?
With what, sorry?
Is it Asperger's?
Oh, that came later. Actually, that was a gift from the journey. Like, I was 27. Because I've had crippling social anxiety, crippling general anxiety for like my entire life, and really bad insomnia that will kick in. And I was having a really particularly bad spate of insomnia. I went to the doctor. I was like, hey, doctor, it's been about 2.5 weeks and I actually haven't slept at all. Probably need some sleeping meds. He gave me the strongest one he could prescribe and it didn't work. And he sent me off to go and speak to someone. That woman happened to be, thank God, a person that specialized in dealing with adults with autism. And she basically pulled the cue. She's like, yeah, the reason why you're not sleeping is because it's a result of the anxiety. The anxiety comes because you've got these missing things because of your Asperger's. Let's address that. And that was that story. So I'm actually really grateful for that.
I don't know much about it. Can you kind of tell us what Asperger's is and how it affects you?
The easiest way, I think, to describe Asperger's is autistic people that can communicate with the outside world. So just as, you know, when you see an autistic person, they're in varying degrees of autism. It's the same with Asperger's. It's on the same spectrum. It's just because we can communicate with the outside world, someone could have as autistic a brain, but because they've got a couple of pieces of wiring in place, they can actually communicate with the outside world. So I've got, you know, when it comes to social interaction, for example, I'm completely self-taught. Like, I had no social graces at all. I actually went off and studied social dynamics because one of my gifts is something systemized and I can learn how to do it. But if something's not systemized, I have a complete and utter meltdown, which is what was happening before with my social anxiety. So like, everything's very ones and zeros. There are no gray areas for my brain naturally. I really have to pause and slow down and observe the nuances and subtleties, because otherwise everything's very much this or that. And very objective driven. Unless there's an objective to something, I find it very difficult to engage with it. And when there is an objective, I find it very easy to move into something. So for me personally, that's how it's shown up. I've got things with remembering numbers and other stuff like that. But generally, I'm wired a bit differently in terms of how I engage.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's useful. And it's interesting hearing you sort of describe that after having heard, you know, at least this top level view of your, you know, childhood and growing up, because, you know, you began by telling us that you had been an asshole up to just previously. And, but it makes sense, maybe, you know, with this Asperger's, even if it was just undiagnosed, it might have led to these, you know, social interactions that were a little off-putting. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't so much that you were an asshole, rather that you didn't know how to, you know, how to relate or whatever.
There was no framework
but without that diagnosis, how would you know, right?
Exactly.
So I kind of love that. I think it sort of, you know, ties the loop. Well, so let's talk a little bit about one of the things that I think endears me the most to you is this idea of sort of personal ownership or personal responsibility of our lives and taking control of things. Mm-hmm. I know for a lot of people, myself included, at varying times in my life, I have felt really wayward, like I'm standing around waiting for somebody to come lift me up and take me to somewhere because I can't do it myself or I don't know the way. And one of the things I liked in doing a little bit of research and prepping for the show was that you seem to put a lot of emphasis on accountability, being personally responsible and that sort of thing. So I wondered if you think you'd talk a little bit about holding ourselves accountable and sort of getting that bit of mindset right, because I think that that's probably key to the rest of what we might discuss.
Love it. So there was an idea that came from my former mission, which was that, you know, I kind of got this idea that became like the buzzing in my ear that the only way I'm going to pull this off is if I depend on myself. And what actually evolved from that was this idea that I'm the common thread in every experience. And that evolved into what is now common denominator theory. Because I mean, look, if you've got 20 relationships in your life, 20 different people, all of different natures and types and stuff and different levels, you can go and individually change every one. But you as a common denominator in all of them, if you make a change in you, every single one of those relationships to some degree must change. Well, I believe that life is a series of relationships with people, places, and things. The people in our lives, the places that we go, the energy of them, the experiences. So if we change the substance of us, it's just the most logical place to start with change. Yes, there are some people that maybe we want to have conversations with for their benefit, for them to make some improvements. But ultimately, the only thing that we have direct control over is ourselves, what we're doing. And when that substance changes, everything changes too.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a ton of sense. And actually, I love thinking about it that way. You know, there's so much emphasis put on how we treat others and, making sure that we're doing the right thing by other people. And I think a lot of times we get sort of lost in that, whatever bit needs to be our personal attention to us. And, I suppose there's a way to go too far and become like, ultimate narcissist or something. But I think that, more value needs to be placed on the care that we take of ourselves. And so I really like that idea, because obviously, you can't go around and change everybody else. You can't make them behave in a certain way, but you're right that in the way that you sort of reflect yourself and the way that you feel about yourself or the way that you carry yourself out to those people, will either influence them or it won't. But, that's sort of the extent of what you can do. So I really like that metaphor.
Yeah. I mean, you can go down the rabbit hole with it, guys, and when we look into esoterics and people want to talk about the quantum and quantum entanglement and all this fancy stuff, yeah, if we want to go down the rabbit hole on this, the very substance and nature of who we are becomes reflected in what we experience with others. So if you want to kind of take it down the woo-woo path, well, a change in me will be reflected energetically and therefore experientially in the other people in our lives too. But ultimately, I find people get caught up in the sexiness of that and lose sight of the key thing is, who am I? What am I? How am I showing up? What choices am I making? Am I in integrity? Am I an honest person? Then why am I complaining about people lying to me, right? The relationships that I'm having with people, am I showing up as the person that actually matches as a resonance with the kind of people that I want to be around, that I want in my life? And a lot of the time the answer is no, but we jump to the other people without taking care of what's happening inside of us.
Yeah, that.
No, I think that's great.
One of our recent guests that we had on was Todd Henry, and he wrote a book called Louder Than Words. And just what you brought up, like, how can you complain about someone lying to you if you're not honest yourself? Just pure common sense. You've actually written a book yourself. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I've got a couple of books under my belt. The first book I kind of just wrote just to pop my book writing cherry, because I've been making the whole thing about writing a book. That's about mastering time. It's cool. It's a great little resource, but it doesn't really fit into the proper body of my work. The Dreamer's Manifesto kind of is an explanation of my catchphrase, dream with your eyes open, why I put dreamer everywhere. It kind of breaks that down. The signature book for me, though, is Stepping Beyond Intention, which is the book that came from that time of rebirth and reforming and my adventure into trying to kill myself. And the model that evolved from that, and most recently, The Money Game, which takes those principles and kind of looks to ground this idea of manifestation, using money as a tool to test that out because it's measurable and it's easy to track. If I set out to manifest $100 and it shows up, I know it worked. If it doesn't, then it didn't. And those are the books that you'll find on my website and on most retailers.
It's interesting. The word that you're using is this idea of manifestation or to manifest these things into your life. Another word that gets used a lot, and I think it's sort of maybe in parallel, is this word intention.
Yes.
And it's interesting, as Mike and I have interviewed a bunch of people. I've interviewed a bunch of other people for a remote work podcast that I do. And it's funny how, regardless of field or expertise or whatever it is you're trying to do, ultimately it does boil down to this intention and being purposeful in the things that we're doing. Mm-hmm. So it's, I guess I love that bit of your messaging, because I found that is the special sauce. Everybody's looking around for, what's the quickest route, or how do we, get rich quick or whatever it is. But I think that the part that gets overlooked when you're looking for a fast way is honestly maybe the easiest thing. And it's just being intentional about what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I mean, when I talk about intentions, what I'm talking about is disrupting whatever's happening unconsciously. I mean, I think Bruce Lipton is someone I've heard it from personally, but I know that other scientists have spoken about this. We operate at an unconscious level as much as 97% of the day, which means that the thinking processes that are leading to the behaviors and the actions that we're taking are happening unconsciously. Most of that was actually programmed into us unconsciously too. We didn't consciously choose that. So a big chunk of what we're doing, a big chunk of how we're showing up, a big chunk of who we are that's being reflected in what we experience is unconscious and doesn't actually have our say. We haven't had our say in it. Intentionality is basically stepping up to the plate and saying, okay, I guess this has been going on without me being in the room. I'm here now, and this is what I choose to experience. and then taking that and saying, this is how I choose to show up against the backdrop of that which I've chosen to experience, until it becomes a part of our unconscious program, which for me, beyond intention, that's what that's all about. Spending the time digging in and changing those unconscious patterns to match what I consciously choose. So I don't need to keep setting intentions, because my intention is a part of how I experience things unconsciously anyway.
Right. So in your coaching practices, and maybe this isn't part of it, but presumably as part of your coaching practice, this intention setting, or this, you may offer a tool set or some sort of something that people can use to begin to make that change. Do you mind giving us just like a little tease or a little pointer on how you might start pushing somebody down the path of setting proper intention? Because I think you're right. It's just like that old adage, we only use 10% of our brain or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, right or wrong or mathematically correct or not, like whatever it is, the principle or the premise is that, we're only using a part of our mind. And to cite your study, we may be using even less than 10% of our brain most of the time. And so I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit, because I think that, there are a lot of people that, it's easy to say the words, let's set intention or be intentional about what you're doing. Mm-hmm. But I think that there's a disconnect between saying those words and then actually being able to put them into practice. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I wonder if you'd sort of maybe take us down a little bit of the journey, how that might work if somebody came to you and said, man, I'm stuck. I got to figure out my way. Definitely.
I've actually got a free resource on my website called an intention setting cheat sheet that actually goes through the 5 steps that I generally encourage people to look at. And so I'm going to do an overview of that. And if anyone wants to kind of dig in a little deeper, that's, it's a free resource. It doesn't send you into a funnel to buy something. It's literally just something you can download for free and get some support from. And it actually forms the basis of an article in Forbes that I featured in the beginning of the year around resolutions as an alternative. And that's first and foremost, where am I now? Because I think one of the things that we often fail to do when looking at creating something new is taking a full audit and honestly, lovingly, and compassionately accepting where we are now. It doesn't matter what relationship caliber I want to step into, or what health I want to be in, or how much money I want to create. If I don't accept where I am now, then I'm not going to have a starting space. And therefore, any strategy that I build is going to be defunct, because it's not going to match necessarily where I am now. So the very, very first thing I always encourage people to do is to sit down and honestly look in the mirror and say, where am I now? How much do I weigh? What's my body fat? If we're talking about health, what's going on with my blood work? If it's relationships, what have my relationships been up till now? Because the environment doesn't lie about what's going on inside. It's always going to be perfectly reflected in my environment. So if I take a look at my relationships and then how I've actually been showing up in relationship, then maybe I'm going to be able to create a more effective route to what I want to do going forward. If we're talking about a career path, maybe I'm being overlooked because I haven't actually taken the time out to gather the skills to actually be worthy of that level up in my career. If I'm saying I want to have a 6-figure business, but I haven't actually been adding value to the world on a regular basis, or, my business doesn't even really have the scope for scalability because I haven't actually sat down and taken an audit of it. So that's the first thing I'd always say. Where am I now?
Yeah. And I want to make just a quick comment on that. I don't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to point out or draw attention to the fact that the one word that you used in there that I think is really critical is compassionate.
Yes.
I'm notorious for looking at all those situations that you just described and going, man, I suck. I'm a horrible XYZ. I can't do this the right way. I'm not capable, blah, blah, blah. And so that sort of is the end of the journey. A lot of times, you can easily dismiss, I'm in this state, all right, my business isn't big enough. And, it's because I'm not capable. And then, excuse made, now I can walk away. And so I really like that you said compassionate and this idea of actually, just recognize, but don't judge, this is where you are and that's okay. Whatever you've done has got you here. So now how are we going to fix it? And so I really like that.
There's something to that. And I think it's sometimes we forget, especially when we look at all the sexiness of manifesting and intentions. So we're human. We are human. Nobody's perfect. If you're a Christian, Jesus lost his crap and started throwing things over in the temple. And at the last minute, he's like, hey, Pops, I know I signed up for this thing, but I'm not sure I really want to do it. So if someone at that level of development isn't switched on all the time, what about us every day? We're not going to be switched on all the time. And so coming with compassion to this exploration of where we are, remembering that we are human, but also that regardless of what we've been doing up till now, we do have the opportunity to change the script and do something different going forward. Everything that has been true is only true up until now. And when I bring that consciousness and when I start moving deliberately, bringing a level of awareness and bringing a level of intentionality and expansive choice to what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, what I'm doing, I can change it, but I have to own it. And if I'm doing that against the backdrop of shame, which is insidious, guilt, blame, beating myself up, all I'm doing is just letting the mind win at doing its job of keeping me in the same place. The mind's not our enemy, it's our friend, but its job is to keep things the same. And it will sometimes use these tricks to kind of lure us into, oh, there's no point, I'm just going to keep things the same, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, that compassionate piece is big, because I think it just bypasses those narratives of disempowerment that keep us locked in the same choices and therefore the same experiences.
Well, this kind of reminds me of like a business using a balance sheet to define how the business is doing, like without that, assets, liabilities, you can figure out exactly what your business is worth. Mm-hmm. Same kind of thing. You just kind of analyze yourself and figure out where you sit in life and take an honest assessment of you and where you're at, and start manifesting, as you like to call it, another life for yourself,
Exactly. And the really cool thing is, once you look at the assets and liabilities, you can see where the strengths and weaknesses are. My strengths are now I can double down on. My weaknesses I can go and get support for. I can get the right guidance. I can read the right books. I can do the right courses and training. I can get the right mentorship and support. But I can't do that unless I know where I am.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes sense. All right. So let's continue down that path then. What's next?
What do I want? and this seems like, oh, of course, I know I want to be a millionaire. I can tell you this. One of my programs, I've been running it for about 2 years and change now. I think it's just over 2 years now, called Micro to Millions. And one of the funniest things for me was actually seeing firsthand people that claimed that they wanted to be a millionaire and actually realizing months in, I don't need to be a millionaire to live the life that I want to live. And so, people came in and said, yeah, I want to be a millionaire, blah, blah. Actually, I kind of just want to pay my debts and clear my mortgage and put some money in the college fund. And they actually were really satisfied with just a couple of 100,000. Some people even less. Well, one person, which was one of the funniest stories I've got. She worked a government job, absolutely hated it, was like depressed and sad every day. I want to leave. I want to be financially free. Took us a couple of months, got her financially free, gets to leave her job. It doubled down on the sadness, because she was like, oh, I'm so lonely. I don't know what to do with myself. So when I say what I want, I mean, really interrogate the truth of what you say you want. Because you say that you want to be in a relationship, really? Maybe you're happy by yourself. And it's because it was drummed into you that you have to be married and have 10 children or whatever it is. You say that you want to be the boss of your division, but maybe you just want to be lovingly respected, and that you're looking at that as the way to get it. And actually maybe just loving and accepting yourself and respecting yourself is going to give you that. Maybe changing the environment is going to get you that. So what do I want? Not through other people's eyes, not based on what society tells me I should want, not what mum and dad or pastor or preacher or priest or whatever holy man had said. What do I want at a soul level? What do I actually want from my life?
Yeah, it's actually one of the things that Mike and I talk about quite a bit, and we warn about is, it's one of the things that happens with social media a lot, right? Is you get caught up watching everybody on Instagram and wanting what they have, right? Yeah. It's not what you want or whatever. It's you're attempting to reach their goal, which is, not a winning thing to do.
One of the things that drives me nuts is, I use YouTube a lot to study on certain topics or whatever I'm interested in at the time. And you see on the sidebar of this video how I went from 0 to $4 million in assets in 2 years. And then it's a picture of his boat and his little Maserati over here. And what he's not telling you is he's $4 million in debt. And if anything happens, he's going to lose everything he owns. So it's mind-boggling to me. And every time I see a video like that, I always hit the little 3 dots and say, don't recommend this channel to me.
Well, it's funny. I follow this one profile on Instagram called Influencers in the Wild, and it cracks me up because it's basically people catching videos of people making videos for Instagram. Right.
So I want to see this account. I need to see this account.
It's the best. Yeah. It's the only thing that keeps me on Instagram, to be honest. But what I love about it is it sort of pulls back the nasty curtain on some of this stuff, right? So, I mean, you're busy looking at this hot chick in a bikini and her dude standing in front of the yacht, whatever. Well,
no, the dude's holding the camera, taking the picture of her. Right. That's what the dude's doing.
Well, and so, and the yacht belongs to a Russian oligarch. Like, it has nothing to do with these people. They're just standing in front of a yacht, you know, and or they're standing in front of somebody's Porsche out front of the mall. You know, like it's not their car, it's not their life, it's not their anything, but it's this thing they're putting forward. And so what I love about this Influencers in the Wild is that it does sort of pull back the curtain, you know, because you see the person doing the dumb pose in front of the whatever, and then being chased off by security. You know, whatever. That's amazing. So it's definitely worth the checkout. Definitely, so, but I love that idea, and you know, and it's funny because it's another one of these things that's easy to say. You know, what do I want? And it's really flippant and easy to say, oh, well, I want $1 million. You know, but I think taking that time to be sort of self-analytical and really spending the time with yourself to understand what it is you actually want. And this is something I'm not particularly good at, but I you know, at least on a logical level, can see it and agree with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's some exercises you can do. There's a great tool that I use when I'm working with people called the 7 levels exercise. I do a variation of that. I read it in a book who got it from someone who got it from someone. I don't actually know where it originally came from, but all that we do is we interrogate the spoken desire down through 7 levels, see what's really sitting underneath. And what I like to do from that is actually pull out, really extrapolate, what's the emotional pull beneath the thing? Regardless of what it is, what's the emotional pull? Because that's what we want. You know, people that say they want a Lamborghini or Ferrari, do they want the Ferrari or do they want what it does for them emotionally, what it triggers up? Maybe it's respect. Maybe it's getting the girl because you didn't do that and you saw that video on Instagram about that hot chick that left her boyfriend for the guy that had the Ferrari. I don't know what it is, but there's always something underneath. And when we really dive in, we can get to it, which actually leads on to the next step, which is, once I've identified what that emotional state is, I start looking at how I can start generating a connection to that emotional state with where I am today, based on where I am in my life. And that will actually start to build up a momentum that will open me up to opportunities that are going to start taking me towards that thing that I want to create. Having done the audit, we'll know where we're short. We'll know what we're lacking. We'll know where we need the leg up or the help. And again, we can use that to move in and start creating the structures and the frameworks to allow us to actually step into that thing that we want to experience.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And it's funny. One example I always use, you know, sort of around this topic is this idea that, you know, in my business, whenever I was, you know, especially when I was younger, but, you know, if we were hungry for work and we were trying to find new clients or whatever, I'm not a particularly spiritual guy, but like I would sort of just, I don't know, say out loud to somebody that I need work, you know, hey, we're looking for projects, you know, man, you know, we're out there on the hunt. And I think just by saying it out loud, and again, you know, back to our ideas of manifestation and knowing what we want, you begin sort of acting as if, right? You know, so then I start behaving like somebody who's looking for work, which, you know, I mean, whether it's, you know, in the juju or it's out in the air or whatever it is, or whether I'm just saying, you know, keywords on social media or, you know, whatever it is, this amalgamation of intention and, you know, idea of what I'm looking for and all that sort of usually, you know, with almost 100% in my experience, ends up manifesting as work. And so I think it's really interesting as you're taking us through this journey, you know, how I can look at these little things that I've done over the years and go, okay, well, that makes absolute sense to me, you know? So I'm really enjoying this. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, and I think something that actually comes from what you're saying there is that, you know, it's easy. I love talking about the sexiness that people get lost in, but we can get caught in the sexiness and lose sight of the fact that reality is actually measurably operating at different levels of density. Measurably. We've got physical matter that we taste, see, and touch, and we use, you know, instruments to measure what's going on. I can weigh myself and know where I'm at. But then I have thought waves, thought forms that are actually expressing as my ability to have the neural pathways that actually lead to the behaviors that get me where I am. Right. And that's going to depend physically on my genetics. So, for example, I started working out with this online training company and they were like, yeah, you know, we're going to sort your diet out and stuff. And I'd actually found that the keto thing and I tried it out and it was working for me. And they're like, no, that's rubbish. You know, you've got to eat carbs. I put on 20 pounds eating carbs. When I got my DNA checked, I was actually optimized for burning fat over carbs. Now, that's not for everybody. going back to, doing things other people's way. It worked for me. But me making the choice and having thoughts of how I want to see myself, like what shape do I want to be in, what health do I want to be in, those thoughts become neural pathways that become behaviors. Those behaviors and choices were matched against how I show up optimally will lead to positive results. But none of this is possible unless I'm able to emotionally hold the experience, because as you know, we have crimes of passion. The way that we think is affected by emotional state. And the way that we think affects what we're able to choose. So what we're feeling, what we're thinking, and what we're doing will always lead to what we experience. We just don't always consciously go through the process of putting those pieces together.
Yeah.
I have sense.
I have this thing where if I want to do something or get something done, I'll tell it to someone. I'll say, hey, this is what my goal is. This is what I'm trying to accomplish. And by verbalizing that to someone else, now they're holding me accountable to get it done. So that's kind of my little trick to doing stuff is I'll vocalize it to someone else, not just myself, because I can hold myself accountable. But if I've said that to someone else, even though they're not going to come up and say, hey, are you doing your pull-ups this week? Are are you working on the lawn? Whatever my goal is, they're not going to say that to me. But the fact that I told them I'm working out or I'm doing this or I'm dieting or whatever it is I'm doing, that holds me in account to myself. That's kind of my little trick that I do.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And that's sort of my experience as well, Mike, is that, I think, ultimately what you're doing is saying it to yourself, which is giving you sort of permission to move forward. But I seek a lot of outside validation myself. And so that's something that, to hear it from somebody else or to have at least said it out loud to somebody else, I feel a greater sense of need to do what I said I would do.
And there's an idea that I love to throw in the mix. I love throwing in contrary ideas, like just to kind of disrupt things, is I always invite people to say, why have you not claimed it? Why have you not said it out loud? And generally speaking, it's because there's a feeling of fear, unworthiness, or anxiety about it, which actually is giving you a clue as to what the emotional space is. And abundance doesn't really come from an emotional space of fear. They're not connected. There's a different experience that's going to flow from that fear, a different mental process that's going to be going on, different neural pathways that are going to be imprinted, different habits and behaviors and choices, which is not going to lead me to my abundance. So, taking stock and being, again, very intentional about what I'm choosing to feel, what I'm choosing to think, and what I'm choosing to do would lead me to the outcome that I want to experience.
All right, cool. Well, let's keep this going. What's our next step?
Next step is to pull your finger out and start moving towards it. It's like, actually, go out there and do things differently. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome, but the same way. If I do things differently, things cannot remain the same. And I love to invite people to do that in what I call micro shifts, not trying to swallow the whole elephant in one mouthful, just saying, okay, what's one thing that I can do today in how I feel, how I think, on what I do that's going to lead me one step closer to my goal. And a compound effect builds on the back of that. If every day I'm chipping away at who I am, I'm going to reveal the David that's sitting underneath all of that marble, which is my intended outcome. It doesn't have to be big chips. Small chips consistently made are always going to get us to where we want to be.
When I've seen this meme floating around of two ladders, guy trying to climb a ladder. One has small steps, the guy can climb it. The other one it's the same height ladder, but the steps are spaced out and he can't even reach the very first top one. So it's a very good visual example of how small steps can actually make a difference. And you'll start going up the ladder, but if you can't reach the first rung, you're kind of stuck. And another analogy of that is you think of like a hoarder, for example. He's got this house just completely full of everything he, ever accumulated in his life. He brought each one of those items into his house one at a time. And over a period of time, that house just filled up with nastiness. So it's amazing how little things just done over a period of time can accumulate and how much you can get done. I'm a real fan of just doing small things as you can handle them, and then gradually over time your project will come into view.
Definitely. And sort of just in the spirit of transparency, this is one of the areas that I fall the most short in that I'm notorious for biting off more than I can chew, where I take these giant leaps into projects or whatever, And, and maybe it looks pretty good for a while, maybe it sustains for a bit. And then, eventually it will become clear that there's actually nothing behind it. It's just this facade or whatever. And so I find that, as it comes to setting goals and things like that, I tend to choose the goal that's just a little bit too far away. And I think if I'm like armchair psychologist here, I would say that that's putting it just far enough out of reach that I don't have to bother actually doing it. And so I think it actually keeps me from making progress, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's important to talk about this. And you've heard a bunch of people, they use acronyms like SMART and these different things, SMART goal, where you're setting these, small and actionable, time-based goals. And, and I think that there's something to that, and I think it sort of aligns with what you were saying, but it's definitely not the easiest thing to do. I think just like most of these buckets, they fall into the category of easier to say, but more difficult to implement. So I'm glad we're having this conversation.
Ryan, a good example of that is that website project I was working on. I was very guilty of jumping in the deep end of that pool and trying to swim. And I honestly think if I would have kept working at it, the rate and the consistency that I was working at it for the first 2 years, it'd be done by now. If we didn't go down the studio tangent and try and do all that stuff, and I just kept working on it at the rate I was going, it would be done. Just by doing those small steps. And so I think, you can bite off these big goals and try and accomplish something that's tremendous. It's the consistency and the ability to stick to it and do something on a daily basis, no matter how big or how small, that's going to get the project done. And I'm kind of annoyed with myself that it's not done right now. So it's one of those things.
Yeah, but I think that's right.
I mean, I talk about something called minimum deliverables, which is what we insert into the micro shifting process. And a minimum deliverable is whatever I can do without resistance. I like to say, push your edge and not your buttons. Go to the edge of what you can do. And if you find any resistance, just take a step back. And even if it's the money, I mean, I had one guy, a mate of mine, wasn't even a client, it was a mate of mine I was supporting. And, he wanted to do a project. And I said, step 1, go and buy a journal. What? Yeah, buy a journal. Step 2, put it by your bed. Step 3, open it up. Not even to write anything, open it up. And then just write how you feel about the project, one word. And then start journaling it and uncover what's underneath. And through that process, he built a momentum that actually took life. And now he's done 2 books. He's got his podcast. He's got his YouTube channel. He's got his coaching program, and he's set up. But it came from him just starting to disrupt the path that he was on and build that new momentum towards what he wanted to be with something as simple as buying a journal. Yeah. Seemingly insignificant, but those really seemingly insignificant small steps on the ladder have got him to where he wants to be today.
I saw a training video for someone working out that the trainer was like, whenever I take on a new client, I don't ask them to, let's do the most amount of push-ups you can do, you can do 50. Why don't you do 50? He says, I have them stop at 30 so that the next day they can do 35 more. And the next day they can do 35 more. If I make them do 50, then tomorrow all they can do is 10, and they're burnt out and they're tired and they can't progress. Whereas if I have them do, 35 in a week, they've done, 200, 300 push-ups. Whereas if they would max out every day, they wouldn't be able to do the same amount of reps the next day. And consistency to grow. And so I think that, don't do, a 12-hour shift trying to get everything done in one thing. Segment it, do the small bits here and there. And over a while, you'll get a lot done. So
definitely. Microshift is a consistent series of baby steps made in the direction of a consciously chosen outcome. That's how I define it. Consistent series of baby steps made in the direction of a consciously chosen outcome. If you do that, you will always get to where you want to get to.
Yeah, I like that.
So, all right. So at this point, we are 4 steps into this process. We've made some conscious decisions. We've figured out and gotten to the bottom of what we wanted to do. We've started to set our intention and we've taken our first step. How do we round out this process?
Continue to take steps against the backdrop of who you are with compassion and patience for yourself, remembering you're not going to be switched on all the time. Again, we're human. There's going to be days when you don't feel like doing it. Anything. Go back to the minimum deliverable. Maintain momentum by doing something seemingly small. If you're in a workout journey, a fitness journey, Maybe you haven't listened to Mike's advice and you did 50 push-ups yesterday. Don't beat yourself up that 10 is all you can do. Go to the edge of what you can do, celebrate that, and keep going. Maintain the momentum, even if it's with the smallest steps, because, a meter continued may not be 10 miles, but it's a meter. We're still going. And if I keep checking in with myself and saying, okay, maybe I can do 1.5 today, maybe I can go and do a mile, but I keep checking in and going to the edge of what I'm capable of, remembering that I can go and get support to keep me accountable if that's what I need, to keep me motivated, to keep me skilled and resourced to be able to make those choices and take those actions that are going to keep me going in the right direction. Then you will get there, no matter what it is or where you are today.
Yeah. Another thing that I like to do is, I don't know if it's the right term for it, but talent stacking or task stacking is another thing. But like, say, for example, you're going to the bathroom and your towel's on the couch. Don't just go to the bathroom, take the towel with you, as you're doing one thing, do another thing at the same time, and be purposeful with what you're doing so that, you're able to take the action for one thing and accomplish two things at the same time. Just little things, Yeah.
I'm going to bring some.
So as we're starting to get to the end of this thing, I wonder if you could just sort of, give us a little bit of, further detail on like where we can go and learn more about the things that you do. We, of course, in this conversation didn't get too deep. We just really covered in great detail one aspect of what you do. But I wondered if you'd talk about that a little bit more and, where people can go and get a hold of your resources.
Definitely dreamwithdan.com. It's easy to remember. My website, dreamwithdan.com. Everything's on there. Any free events that we're doing, I'm generally doing some kind of, and my free events aren't like 15 minutes of talking in like an hour trying to sell you stuff. I'm generally trying to give value because I really believe in that. Like I said, there's the free resources section. I've got the intention setting cheat sheet that I referred to today, a couple of cool visualizations that will support all my social media links. Everything's on dreamwithdan.com. It's the best place to find me.
Great. Well, one last thing I want to do. Oh, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
I was going to say, before we kind of check out of the conversation, one of the questions on your one sheet is you tell people to stop meditating. That to me is kind of, like everyone else we've talked to says meditate and be mindful and thinking. As someone who's a mindfulness person like yourself, that seems counterintuitive. So can you kind of break that down for us?
It's deliberately disruptive. I didn't say don't meditate. In order to stop something, I have to have been doing it in the first place. To stop something, I have to have begun the process of it. So what that's really a call to is, again, honoring all of what we are. Far too many times I see people that they want to go and start a business and all they do is make their vision board and then sit cross-legged in lotus position, visualizing it every day and seeing it in the quantum field and then wondering why they're still broke. Get off your butt. Take all of that yummy juiciness that we've charged up from meditation, from our spiritual practice, from our yoga, from our mindfulness, from our visualization, and then follow through with changes in what we're thinking and what we're doing to align with it so that we get the outcome. So it's not a call to not meditate. It's a call to don't allow the process of manifestation, of creation, to stop at meditation. That's what it's all about.
I like that.
I like that too. But, and I also like, and maybe this isn't even how you intended this to come off, but one of the things that occurs to me is that a lot of us get trapped in this sort of loop of thought where we just think, but we never do. Right. And so, we can be intentional. Yeah, we can set, goals and do all this stuff. But if, and this is just how it came off to me, but, if we don't stop meditating and get off our ass and go do something, then, we're never going to make any progress anyway. And so, so I think that's maybe, not what you were talking about, but it's definitely a thought that occurred to me.
Definitely. Because we can get caught in the loop of spirituality and mindfulness. We can get caught in the loop of thought. We can even get caught in the loop of action. But it's those three things brought into alignment with a consciously chosen intention. We're chipping away at it every day that will get us anywhere that we want to be.
Well,
that's
what
I see in my life.
I like that you brought up we can get caught in the loop of intent of action as well, because lots of times we'll be working on the wrong thing. And it's subliminally where we think we're getting a lot done, I'm working, but you're not working at, the things that matter in the business. You're working on the things that it's busy work, essentially, to make you think that you're getting stuff done. But in all reality, you're afraid to go and talk to the client. You're afraid to actually go and do what needs to be done with the business or this or that. So I like that you brought that up.
Yeah. Business versus productivity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's great because you're right, Mike. I mean, it can be in business, but it could be, like we discussed earlier, relationships with other people, or, it could be anything, right? I mean, if you're actively, looking over here when Mr. or Mrs. Right is over there, then, it doesn't do you any good to keep looking over here. Yeah. And so I think that's a great point. So to wrap this up, once again, it's streamwithdan.com.
Yep.
You can go there, check out all the information. Dan, any parting shots before we get out of here?
Just stay human. Remember that you're human. You're not going to be switched on all the time. And I've been really driving this home everywhere recently, because I think with the up in attention that's been given to spirituality and mindfulness, people are getting caught in the magic and beating themselves up. We are all human. We haven't elevated into the heavens and become sparkling rainbows of light yet.
Maybe you haven't.
All of us except Mike. But that's definitely something I just encourage people to do. Like, just be easy. None of us are getting out of this alive, so don't take it all so seriously.
Yeah, I love that. Well, cool. So thanks, Dan. We really appreciate the conversation. Thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show, this week, every week, supports us over at eggscast.com, and subscribes to the show on iTunes and everywhere great podcasts are found. So if there's nothing else, Mike, anything?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Dan, and we'll see you all next time.